ladies and gentlemen, all Diablos in a row completed. I'm gonna rate them in what I feel about the campaign and the game separately overall. Okay, so let's talk about D1 first. This is my favorite out of all of them. This is gonna be wild opinion, but D1 is literally my favorite out of all of them, dude. It's the most, I think it's the most like simple. Okay, so back in the day it wasn't really simple, but like nowadays when you go back and play through it, it's just go through the 16 dungeons. You do them all in a row. The voice acting is like A+ on all of them. I want to say boss fights are like, I mean, they couldn't really do boss fights back in the day, right? So like you have the Butcher, which is probably like the scariest fucking moment, right? You have the Butcher, which is terrifying. You have bullshit Hawk Tuas. It's also bullshit because like the Hawk Tuas from the dog are actually completely fucking annoying. Then we have D2, which is easily the best out of all of them. Like, I think this is like what I would consider like objectively the best. You know what I mean? The dogs are the worst. Like, D1 is like actually kind of bullshit when you play it. Like, it feels bullshit when you're playing against some of them. D2, in my opinion, is the best because the items are the best. Like, the items straight up are the best. Like, there's the best items out of any of the Diablos. Okay, cutscenes, maybe the best cutscenes like out of all of them as well. D4 comes close. Okay, so you have the best cutscenes. Then you have voice acting once again, voice acting, and the writing this time as well. This is the first time when we see like actually good writing and whatnot. I feel like the writing's okay in D1, but the voice acting is like maybe a little over the top. But they kind of were like, I feel like you can't really shit on the voice acting back in the D1 days because like people were still kind of overacting a lot. So items, cutscene, voice acting, writing, and then you would be stupid if you don't mention the music. Which honestly, D1 gets music as well, but it doesn't get. It gets like A+, whereas this is S+. Like the D2 music is actually insane, and then the X-Pack is actually like very well done. So like the X-Pack is insane also. So I feel like out of all of these, the music for me is the biggest standout, followed by items, then probably cutscenes, then probably the writing and the voice acting, and then like how good the expansion is. I think they're in that order. So for me, it's like number 1 for me is music so good. The items would be the number 2 reason for me. Cutscenes would be the number 3. Voice acting and writing, which these kind of go hand in hand. Like these are like kind of both the same thing here, a little bit. Like they're a little bit the same, and it just shoots off how much you love the cutscene and voice acting because they work so well together. All right, so honestly, these are kind of the same thing here. So, big fan. And then, all right, so D3, though, here, right, is... I'm going to use the term simple. So, when you're playing this one, this is the first time where I felt like they were trying to make the games reach a wider audience, honestly. Like, I felt... This one, for me, felt like, okay, this is a new audience. New audience. The voice acting is still okay. I'm going to say B+, maybe. Like, it's not as memorable as the other ones. And the music is mid. I feel like the music wasn't music like B, maybe. B-, maybe. Like, I feel like the music was like not as memorable either. Like, at D3 is the point where it started to be like, okay. Like, I don't hate it, but it probably has the worst campaign. I feel like it's the worst campaign. And arguably, out of all of them, has the worst graphics. Worst style is what I'll say. I'd probably say it has the worst campaign, worst style. Maybe the voice acting deserves better than a B, but it's not as memorable for me. Like, this one felt to me like it felt like a different game, really, plus X-Pack. I will say this, though, about this, the X-Pack itself was like an S-tier X-Pack. Like S-tier plus. Like, it was a good expansion. It's pretty good. But I feel like D3 itself is like a little mid. I don't think it was bad. Like, I know on launch people were like hating on it. I didn't have that experience. I just liked it all the way through. But it was the type of game where like it didn't, this game changed my life meme. Definitely didn't change no life. But I played it and I had a good time. This felt for me like an Xbox game. That's the way I'm going to say it. It felt to me like a couch co-op Xbox game. So one of the things I would do here is I would, just to make some room here, let's just make some room for some other points here, which is that, okay, so we have Co-op. The co-op was pretty good. Couch in particular. Okay, accessible. Like, it was really accessible for people not into the industry, because this was my first ARPG, and it was super easy to understand. So good co-op, good accessible. The, you know, F to the auction house, I suppose. It had set items, which for me, I hate set items. Personally, I hate these. Okay? But I thought the cube was cool. Cube, in my opinion, W. Like, I liked the cube as well. So I had some things that were both, like, good and bad about it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I think D3 is was like a 7 out of 10. This is how I felt about it. D3 is like 7 out of 10. Okay? And then we got D4, right? And then we just say D4 bad. And then that's it. And then that's all the series. No, just kidding. I'm not going out. D4 X-Pack Inc. So then we have the campaign is actually really good. So for me, I think the campaign is, like, honestly A tier. Arguably A tier plus. I think the campaign is actually, like, phenomenal. Not as good as D2. But this campaign is better. It's better than D3. Okay, so there. That says better. Not butter and not butler, but better. It's better than the D3 campaign. Alright? The music's, like, better than D3, worse than D2. So the music is, like, you know, better again. Better than D3. The voice acting is good. Voice acting. I think the writing's fine. I think the writing gets shit on a little bit harder than it needs to. I think the writing and story's fine. Now, the thing that really does really well is cutscenes. Cutscenes are S tier. And here's how you know if people are full of shit or not. If people would start saying that the cutscenes and the campaign and all that's bad, you know they're full of shit. Because when these cutscenes and the story and all that was coming out, both before it, everyone was hyped as fuck. Everyone loved the cutscenes. Everyone was super into it. Everyone was jerking off at how fucking good the cutscenes are. Then the game launches and people have problems with it. But the campaign is really good. The cutscenes were good. Voice acting and writing is fine. I think all of this, to be honest, campaign, music, voice acting, writing, this is all better. This is all better than D3. Like, this is definitely an improvement over D3 in my opinion. Like, pretty much easily an improvement, I would think. I'm curious to see how well the X-Pack actually keeps up with it. That's my take on them so far, though. So if I was going to have to rate them, let's say from a story perspective, story/campaign, I'd go like this. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say story campaign, D2 first, then D1, then D4. Arguably, this could go here. Like, these could arguably swap, depending upon how you feel about it. D4 is probably better than D1. And then you could go D3. So, like, these are almost tied. You could go D4 here, D1 here. Like, you could really swap these around either way. Adjusted for their time is the thing, though. So D1 gets carried, like, it seems objectively better that D4 is better. But since we're talking about story as well, like, for its time, D1 was, I mean, you know, there wasn't as much competition. So I'd say it probably goes something like that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, let's say we want to go music now, okay? Music, I think this one's obvious. I think this goes D2, like, by a mile, okay? Then it goes D1, then D4, then D3. In my opinion, that's all, like, the obvious choices. Sensing a trend here? Yeah, I mean, so far, 2 D4. You think the music in D4 is better than D1? See, D1 had some of the original Tristan music, though. So it would be hard for me. Now, we have items. What should the final category be at this point? There should be one more probably good rating. What should we rate the final one by? Oh, yeah, visual is probably... Gameplay? Oh, yeah, I suppose gameplay. Okay, items. This is D2. This is fucking obvious. Needs no debate. After that, it's probably, honestly, D3. Then after that, it's D1. Then I think it's D4. D2 is obvious. I mean, it basically created PoE items. Like, this seems to be the best itemization there is. D3, I don't really like the itemization in D3 that much, but they actually added the cube, and the way they kind of did the skills, I actually didn't mind it that much. I think it's something like that. D1 wasn't really so much about the items as much as it felt like leveling. There wasn't like that many items in the game. But for back in the day, it was pretty good, but I feel like it was more about like the combat and the story, or not really story as much as like the voice acting and sort of the experience of playing through the game. D3 hands you sets. Well, nowadays it does, but I'm talking like from the get-go here. And then D4, like the items have been, damaged on Tuesday so bad they literally had to rework the entire game's items. So I think that one has to be at the bottom of the list. And nowadays, this one probably ekes up somewhere into like here, maybe. It's still a little bit lackluster in items, in my opinion, but it's better now than it was. And then gameplay-wise, this is again D2. D2 is going to be on the top of literally every single list. This is going to be controversial, but I actually think the D3 gameplay is good. I actually think the gameplay itself is like fun in D3. I had a good amount of time. I played it as a casual. I had fun. I never had the complaints everyone had at the start of the D3. I thought the couch co-op was pretty good. I think D3 is actually like... I think D3 was one of the more shit-on games than it deserved. But then again, I was Omega casual, so I could be like having the same take of back then in D3 that a lot of people have about D4 now, which is like, oh, D4 is good. If you don't like it, don't play it. Like I could be the casual version of that for when D3 was out, because it was my first ARPG. I didn't really care that much about no-lifing it. I just played it after work, played it with buddies. I actually enjoyed my time in D3. Like I never had a bad experience in D3. And it's the only game I ever played on 4 different platforms. I played it on Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. I bought it on each one so I could play it with different people because I just liked the couch co-op. I thought the couch co-op was really good. So, and I also thought, and this is before the expansion, but then I played with the expansion too. So I actually think it's really good. Now here's the thing, okay? This is going to be a wild take, but I think the D4 gameplay for me felt better than D1 gameplay. This one is not really a time-adjusted. This is not really a time-adjusted one, because I'm playing D1 now, as opposed, or D4 now, and then playing D1 now, and I didn't play it back in the day. Back in the day, the gameplay would have been phenomenal. It wouldn't get the same rating. It'd be in 3, sure. But for right now, when I'm looking back at it, I actually think that the D1 gameplay can be, like, kind of frustrating. Almost. Like, there's some issues with walking, where in D1, you walk faster, like, left and right than you do up and down, which is kind of weird. It's also, like, doesn't feel very balanced against melee at all. I think the D4 gameplay, because D1 only has basically the campaign and then it's over, and if we compared, like, only campaign to campaign, I think if we time adjusted, the D4 gameplay and the campaign's still better. Like, I actually thought the D4 campaign's pretty good. But the reason D4 gets shit on now is because after the campaign, people are expecting more, because they want to continue playing the game, so it gets shit on then at that point. But the campaign versus campaign, like D1, when you beat the campaign, the game's over. So if I actually think the D4 campaign experience in terms of gameplay is probably better than the D1 one. However, that being said, D1 is literally, this is still my favorite game. This is my favorite game to play through out of all of them, even though I'm rating this from a gameplay perspective, like mechanically how it feels to play it. So just, there's some nuance to these opinions here, basically. So that would be items and gameplay for me. I think it ends up looking something like that. If I was really going to break down everything about it, I think that's pretty much how I feel about all of them.